Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. The sun is still out. I'm walking home around 3 o'clock and the sun is still out, although I bet I've got an hour and a half till it sets. But right now, it's actually pretty nice. I have the flaps up on my... Wow, jacked up car just went by. I have the flaps up on my Russian-style aviator bomber hat. And so my ears are a little chilled, but I can hear better and thus, hopefully, will make better content for you. For those of you who are just turning in, we are in the middle of going through my top 50 board games of all time, at least the current updated list. Every 2 years I update the list, and this year, instead of doing 1 or 2 mega episodes, which is what I did, I think, in 2019, I'm doing 8 short episodes in which I reveal a few games each episode. And again, instead of talking about the game in elaborate terms, although I have ended up kind of summarizing them, I'm trying to name one thing I like about each game, or a really significant element that I like about each game, and why it is staying on my list. So that's kind of what's going on today, and let's jump into it. So last episode we got up through game number 50 or number 30. So this episode is going to be games 29 through 23. I know it's weird, but I did the math and it's going to work out evenly. Okay, so here we go. Game 29 is once again a new game to my list. Now, I added a lot of new games to my list this year, but a lot of them are at the bottom half. In part because I've played them a couple times, enough to know that I think they're amazing, but not enough for them to displace the old favorites, or a lot of the old favorites. So that's what's kind of going on there. And this is Sidereal Confluence. Sidereal Confluence is a beast of a game, really complicated to learn. But boy, howdy, it was a fantastic experience the time I played it, and I'd really like to get it to the table again. It is an event game. You have to be ready to play it, and it takes like 3 or 4 hours, so it takes some planning. But when you get the opportunity, it's got the weirdest set of exchanges that I've played in a while, and that's part of what I really like about it. Is I don't generally like negotiation games, but the fact that this game has this sort of freewheeling, wheeling and dealing, handing stuff out, trying to talk to people phase, it's just different than almost anything else I've played before in a way that I really like. It's sort of like I'm reminded a little bit of in Bonanza. You have stuff you want to get rid of and you're trying to trade with people, but imagine everybody doing it at the same time. It's just a delight. I have the second edition, so the art and graphic design are cleaned up a bit. It's still very utilitarian because there's so much going on. You can't have it be too artsy, but boy, it is an interesting game. Well worth a try if you get a chance to play it. This is Sidereal Confluence, my number 29. I know it's published by WizKids. I do not know the name of the designer. Sorry, designer of Sidereal Confluence. If you're listening, wow, who'd have thought? Send me a message. All right, my number 28, slightly up. This one has been in my list every time I've done it. My first list was in 2015. This was my number 1 game in 2015, followed by, it was my number 2 game in 2017, my number 30 game in 2019, and slightly up to my 28th game in 2022. And that is A Study in Emerald from Martin Wallace. This is the first Martin Wallace game I played, and I still love it. It is an interesting, bizarre game full... I have the first edition, so I can't speak to how the second edition changed it. My understanding is they cleaned up some of the nonsense. But it is an interesting, bizarre game full of nonsense. It's got a little bit of deck building to it, a little bit of area control to it, a lot of wonky, weird rules. It's got a plot that just can't be beat. The premise is that you are either anarchists or loyalists trying to either support or destroy the royal houses of Europe. But it's as if the great old ones from the Cthulhu universe showed up in the Middle Ages and took over the great houses of Europe. It's weird, it's fun, it's got lots of literary characters, it's a little bit unbalanced. The win conditions are weird, but I really enjoy it. And every time I play it, I love the experience. That's A Study in Emerald, my number 28 game from Martin Wallace, based on the Neil Gaiman story. Oh, what is it that I like? I know I've said this before and I'll say it again. The thing that I like about a Studying Emerald, it's just really, and this is I think only true in the first edition if I recall. In the game, you're on a team. You're either one of the loyalists, which means that you're loyal to Cthulhu, or you're part of the revolution, in which case you're trying to overthrow the houses of Cthulhu. And at the end of the game, everybody's teams are revealed. If someone on your team has the lowest score, your entire team loses. And then the winner is the person on the other team with the highest score. It's fascinating, really interesting, results in a lot of double crossing and confusion. I will admit, the graphic designer, the game could have used another round of polish or could have used a professional graphic designer to come in, but I stand by the board. The board is bananas looking. It is pink and green and weird, and I love the board, but I think the game could have used a little bit more polish. And the rule book is tough. That said, a Studying Emerald, well worth a play if you get a chance. I haven't played the second edition, so I can't speak to that one, but the first edition, which is impossible to find, basically, is well worth a play. So come visit me and we'll play it. That's a Studying Emerald from Martin Wallace, published by Tree Frog Games, which was Martin Wallace's company at the time. This was also one of the first board game Kickstarters I backed. Now, this is going to be the challenge, everybody. The higher up I get in the list, the harder it's going to be to just say one thing about the game. I'm going to try to stick to it, though. Which leads me to my number 27, another game that's been on my list for 3 consecutive times. It was number 12 in 2017, number 22 in 2019, and it's now 27. So it's slowly slipping down, but I still hold this game in great esteem, and this is Motainai. Motainai is one of Carl Chudik's weird play cards and do crazy stuff games where you can use cards for a variety of different things, and there's lots of different stuff going on. It is a little bit Glory to Rome. It's sort of halfway between Glory to Rome and Innovation. In Innovation, you are more directly attacking the other players. There's not as much of that in Motainai, but Motainai has some of that. In Motainai, you get to follow other people's actions sometimes, which is really nice. I love the graphic design in Motainai. I love the wild swinginess. There are some games you play where somebody just races to a victory very quickly. There are other games you play where it's a slow build. There are other games still where one person, deploys, 5 really cheap things in their gallery and ends the game really quickly, and then somebody else who only had 1 or 2 things in their gallery, turns out they had a bunch of covered sails and they end up with a whole crap load of points. It's just so interesting and so complicated and so nuanced. I enjoy it every time. So that's Motainai from Carl Chudik. What is it that I like the best about it? I love the fact that you get to do everybody else's action before you do yours. So you're constantly looking to see what other people have done and then playing your action. And a lot of times you're thinking oh, I don't need to do the Smith action because that person is doing the Smith action. But then they play a thing that says you can only copy their Smith actions if you have a paper product in hand. And it's just, there's so much going on. I love the complexity, but mostly that follow mechanism, I'll say, is my favorite, at least this time around. That's my number 27 game, Motainai, from, I believe, Artipia Games. All right, my number 26 has been around a while. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know I enjoy this. It's one of my favorite flip and write games, and this is Cartographers. Cartographers, this is the first time on my list. It's number 26. I don't think I had it in 2019 when I made my previous list, but it is a delight. My favorite thing about this game is that it's very meditative as a drawing experience. I really enjoy, one of my favorite things to do in playing Cartographers is to sit down and play a thinky, thoughtful game of Cartographers in which we're striving for excellent point scores, and at the same time I get to draw a really fun little map as I make my plans. I really love the interplay of the different scoring cards and the way you have to beginning of the game, you have to pick a couple that you're going to really aim for and lean into those. I love the way that the coins accumulate over time. I will say we haven't played as much with the heroes or the skills or the extra maps yet, so I'm interested to see how the game opens up as we add those different elements. But the thing that I like most is the sort of meditative art quality, especially when my wife and I just play 2-player, then we just take our time, color and stuff, and it's fun. So that's my number 26 game, Cartographers. designed by Jordy Allen and published by Thunderworks Games, Cartographers. All right, next up, we have my number 25 game. The game that made me really sit up and take notice of designer Phil Walker Harding. It's after I got this game that I really noticed, like, oh, Sushi Go, Phil Walker Harding. Oh, Imhotep, which I don't really like, Phil Walker Harding. Oh, what's this gingerbread house game? Phil Walker Harding. And that's when I started just really paying attention to him as a designer. Silver and Gold, Phil Walker Harding. The only reason I'm at all interested in Super Mega Lucky Box, Phil Walker Harding. So he is a designer who has shown up again and again and tends to make very good, if somewhat light, games. My favorite of his game, can you guess it? Have you figured it out? It was number 40 in my 2019 game, and it's moved up to number 22, and that is Baron Park. I love Baron Park. The very first time I played it, I think I was halfway through a game at Origins in 2017, and I was like, yep, buying this. It's excellent as a polyomino game where you're building your own display of things. I love the effect of sort of creating a zoo and figuring out how you're going to achieve the most points. I love the race element of trying to get these statues while simultaneously also trying to complete the 3 different scoring objectives. It's just an excellent puzzle game that was like, in 2019, it was already on my list in spot 40. So why did it move up almost 20 spaces from 40 to 25? What made it move up? The expansion. The expansion is ridiculously called the Bad News Bears. It adds 2 modules to the game. It adds a 5th board. So when you're playing sort of regular Baron Park, you start with your initial board and you're going to add 3 more boards, and you'll have a total of 4 boards that you fill in. When someone's filled in the 4th board, the game's over. With the expansion, you now have a 5th board, and the 5th board is an exit. And when you play that, you have to play it with the back exit of the park facing away from where the front of the park was. So there's a little bit of planning there. But more importantly, this 5th board allows you a little bit more room and time to add in grizzlies and or the monorails. So the grizzlies are just huge tiles. They're really big, and the way you get them is by sacrificing one of the I think you have to sacrifice 2 smaller tiles. You have to do like 1 medium, and you have to sacrifice a medium tile and be covering up a steam shovel, and then you get to get a grizzly tile. I think that's how it works. It's been a little while since I played it, but you have to give up something in order to get the grizzly. But then the grizzlies they take up a whole bunch of space, so they help you with that race element, and they're worth a ton of points. So, and then usually if you're playing with the grizzlies, you're going to have one of the grizzly scoring conditions in there as well, maybe, and they'll usually help with that. So the grizzlies are neat. Add more points, a little bit more thinking, etc. And then you have the monorails, and whoa, do the monorails just add intense crunch to the game. So the way the monorails work, you have the cheap little greenery tiles, the level 1 tiles that you could put in anywhere that aren't worth any points. And the way the monorails work is that they have to be on those tiles, and there's a very specific order about how you're going to play those out. You have to be constantly turning corners. So there's a whole bunch of extra planning, but the monorails are worth a ton of points, and they make the game look so neat that suddenly you go from having this flat game, which admittedly had really cute bears on it, but it's flat, to having this 3D thing with these little cardboard monorails stretching around on your board, and it's a delight. I find the monorails so satisfying, and they amp the game up from, a sort of interesting, thoughtful, medium weight game to a crunchy brain burn fest that really can't be beat. And well, I guess it can't be beat by most games. It can be beat by 24 other games. But it is my 25th spot. That's Baron Park. Love it. And I believe the publisher on that, when I bought it, it was Mayday. But I think it's Lookout Spiele now. I could be wrong about that. But Phil Walker Harding is our designer, and the art is from Clemens Franz. Next up, we have my number 24 game, A Feast for Odin. This is an Uwe Rosenberg big box game, the last Uwe Rosenberg big box game up until he made Hallertau. So this was the one before that. It's themed around the Vikings. It's got worker placement. It's got polyomino tile filling, sort of like if you took Patchwork and Agricola and made them one game together. You trade in goods that you've accumulated, and you get polyomino tiles or when you get goods, they are polyomino tiles, and you use those to fill in your board, or you could trade them in for other things later. There's a whole boatload of action spaces. There's all sorts of different things you can do. It is a delight. What I like about this game is the sheer volume of choices that you have. It feels as close to a sandbox as a Euro worker placement game can be, as far as I'm concerned, and it is a real delight. It takes a really long time. It's not a short game, and I don't have the expansion, which apparently fixed some of the wonky scoring elements that people complain about. But overall, it's a real delight, and it's moved from number 11 in my 2017 list to number 25 in my 2019 list to number 24 in my 2022 list. So it's settled in right around the middle of the list. That's A Feast for Odin, a game I enjoy heartily. And what I like best about it is that wide open set of spaces. What's a game I like a little bit more than A Feast for Odin? That would be Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars Rebellion is a fantastic two-player game in which it feels like you are playing the original Star Wars trilogy, only you're playing it out on a board game. You are the rebels trying to hide your base and build galactic support for your rebellion, or you're the Empire trying to find and crush that pesky rebellion. This is a thematic game, but really clever cat and mouse war game with cool ships and fun dice rolling combat, and with the expansion, the combat gets a little smoother, fun character plot arcs, and nice surprises, and great card play, and I like everything about Star Wars Rebellion. The thing I like best about it is the way that you get to have these events appear, which involve characters from the films in ways that you might not have expected, and as a result, it's really neat to see the characters evolving the way you were hoping they would, and I really enjoy getting to, say, put Princess Leia in Carbonite, or have Han Solo lead the rebels in the raid of the Death Star, or whatever. It's a thematic delight. It's a table hog, so you don't want to play it unless you have the room and the time, but it is fantastic and well worth a play. From designer Corey Konecka, publisher Fantasy Flight Games. That is Star Wars Rebellion. That is my number 23 of my top 50, and the last game I'm going to talk about today. So, what have you been playing? What games are on your top 50? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and join the conversation there. We have a forum going called Top 50 List, where people are revealing their choices alongside the ones that I'm revealing in my episodes. So head over there and join us for the conversation. I'd love to hear where these games land on your list and what games are on your list. All right. Well, I think I'm going to call it a day. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.